Thanks for tuning in to the IOB podcast. In today's podcast, segment intros and transitions and a critique Demand does. You're listening to the IOB podcast. My name is Mike, and I'm here to make your podcast the best. So what's the goal of podcasting? I guess the goal of podcasting is to get your message out there, right? Or maybe your guest's message out there. It's to speak and help. It's to share and educate, right? Yes, that's true. But, and this is a big but, to be effective, don't just go one way. Don't just focus on yourself. Don't just focus on your guest. It's not all about you. It's not all about your guest. What I'm trying to tell you is you need to interact with your audience. As you're doing your podcast, as you're talking to your guest, you want to be thinking about your audience. You want to be watching their head, not up and down. You want to see a look of surprise on their faces. You want to hear their laughter or their concern. You want to envision them on the edge of their seat. But, when it comes to interaction, there are really straightforward ways, too, with social media and email, right? You can talk to each other on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. But did you know, actually, that music can really build that sensation of interaction, too? It absolutely does. Now, think about your intro. Your intro builds excitement. Me, the listener, when I start to listen to your podcast, I ensconce myself in my chair, or I start running, or I start doing dishes, or I start my commute. We start together. I'm ready. Let's do this. As soon as I hear your music start us up, I'm like, yeah, here we go. And I'm excited. And your outro at the end of your podcast wraps it up. You give a good summary. You give us a great call to action sequence. And I, your listener, we feel satisfied. And we're eager to tune in next time, especially if you can give us a teaser as to what's coming next time. So your intro and your outro right there, they build excitement, they wrap it up, they make the whole story complete. But there's more. Don't neglect segment intros and transitions. All right? Segment intros and transitions. That's pretty easy to understand what those are. These two features can do the exact same thing. They allow you to interact with your listener. How? They re-engage your listener. They pump up your listener. And sometimes they can wake up your listener. It's true. You're listening to the podcast. There's talkity-talk. And then we hear this music, this segment intro or some transition, and suddenly it wakes you up, the listener. It re-engages. It tells me, oh, hey, here comes something. Here we go. Yeah, the power of music is not a joke. So what is the difference between a segment intro and a transition? I think probably most of you understand, but generally segment intros are short intros, just like to your podcast. They may or may not have a VO, a voiceover. 5 to 10 seconds is perfect. You can trail the music out if you want them. And we use segment intros when you want to step away from your main topic, when you want to move from topic to topic. If, for example, today's top 5, or today's joke, or fools in the news, today in Florida, the more you know. There's all types of different segments that you can have. One of my podcasts, I use a country-speaking voice that gives a fact. So we have a main story, and then we have a segment intro to this country guy who gives a fact based on the main story. And it's always pretty interesting. Actually, what's funny is sometimes that segment character, that country guy, seems to get more and more popular as the podcast goes, and people want to know more and more about this guy, but it's actually me. But the segment intro is cool. It wakes up the listener and tells the listener, hey, here comes this other guy, and everybody gets excited. What about a transition? Transitions are generally much shorter. They can be 1 second or 3 seconds, and you can fade them out in the background too. They're dun 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 dun, whatever, some kind of sound effect, some sort of music effect. They'll have generally no voiceover, and transitions are perfect again from moving to from topic A to topic B. So it can be in your main story. Let's say you do something based on the news, and topic 1 is this, and now we're going to go to topic 2. Instead of saying, now we're going to go to topic 2, you can use a transition. And then after the music fades, start topic number 2. Your listener will eventually understand what this means, and they'll like it. And once again, they'll re-engage. It'll pump them up. It'll wake them up. You can use transitions in lots of different situations, too. Simply, if you only have one topic in your podcast, you can use a transition to go to your CTA, your call to action. Now, we need to do a podcast on CTA, call to action. Definitely need to. Using segment intros and transitions saves words. You can stop saying things in dead air like, okay, so that brings us to, or, so I guess that about finishes today's episode, or, and now on to the next topic, or, and now we want to talk about blah, blah, blah. You can go directly into your segment or your summary or your CTA or whatever it is. It's very clean, and believe it or not, it really sounds professional. Segment intros and transitions are excellent structures. They're excellent features to put into your podcast to add to your podcast's professionalism and charisma. And that together makes everyone feel good. And when everyone feels good, they become fans. And when you have fans, you have downloads, you'll have feedback, and you're going to feel really, really good. If you have any questions about podcasts, especially regarding music and this segment intros and transitions and structure, please let me know. You can respond to this email or hit us up on social media. Pretty much everywhere, well, not pretty much everywhere, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We are the Intro Outro Beds, and introoutrobed.com. Our email is contact@introoutrobed.com. Contact@introoutrobed.com. My email address, Mike, M-I-K-E, not as in microphone, but as in my name, M-I-K-E @introoutrobed.com. TJ is the one that does the music, so contact is perfect for her. I'm the guy that does the newsletter and the podcast, so Mike @introoutrobed.com is perfect if you want to talk to me. And please do. Podcast critique. In today's critique, we're going to do Demand Does. Demand Does has a fantastic podcast where he basically asks 6 questions to his interviewee, and they can produce completely different answers, and we really get to know people. Demand does a fantastic job talking to his guests, getting them to open up, and we get to learn lots of really wonderful things from Demand Does podcast. It's really great. And by the way, on Facebook, he's trying to do a 365, short video every day. What was it, attempt number 4, Demand? You're doing great. Better than me, that's for sure. I should try that. That's good. I like that. So anyway, Demand, I love your podcast. It's really, really a nice podcast. The music, the intro music is great. I would kind of like you to talk over the ending of the music if you could. That involves a little bit of mixing, and it's not that difficult, but you do need to have a software where you can work with separate tracks, music on one track, your voice on another track. It's really great. I really like the podcast, and this podcast has been going for a long time. my goodness, Demand, your show notes are the best, one of the best I've ever seen. Very specific. You really get into details. Sometimes you have a lot of the links to and the time sequence when something pops up. This is something that I need to work on myself. So, Demand, you're leading the pack there. Great job. Your CTA, your call to action is great, but I do recommend giving an email address and a website or your Facebook page every time you do your CTA. Okay, so give your social media every time in every podcast. Now, regarding your audio, you sometimes have excellent control over your audio, and sometimes it's a little iffy. So, for example, in your recent Howard Knight podcast, great podcast, by the way, Howard sounded excellent. Very good, strong quality from Howard, but sometimes you seemed to be a little bit far from the mic. And this consistency in audio is actually really important. You don't want to do that, okay, Demand? Be careful with that. Audio levels were a bit off. In your Kimmy podcast, her audio was a bit low. It wasn't bad, but relatively it was a bit low. And then in your, for example, Dean Giles podcast, both audio sessions were great. And remember, Dean was talking about audio and how important it was for him in his podcasts. And yes, I 100% agree. I don't know if you need to necessarily invest a huge amount of money in audio equipment now, but eventually it's something that I think every podcaster wants to do, and I'm sure that's something that you want to do too. However, there is a way that you can kind of fix this, and it depends on the software you're using, your interview software, and your editing software. And in the Dean Giles podcast, he mentioned how using multi-tracks or separate tracks was really wonderful, and that's absolutely key. I did an interview last week, and we were on the same track. So my editing, the audio levels were off. From the future, from now on, I will absolutely 100% make sure that my voice is on one audio track and the other guy or the other person's voice is on another audio track. If you do that, you're going to be able to keep the levels the same. So your volume and your guest's volume are going to sound the same. Now, going back to the Howard Knight podcast, and I'm really curious if you're using headphones, if you're using cans, or if you're using earbuds, the remote things. I don't even know, because I don't use them. I only use cans. Personally, I hate using anything over my ears or in my ears. However, when you are doing a podcast, it is really effective, because if your cans are good enough quality, and if you got to kind of turn the volume up a little bit, you are going to hear when you step away from the microphone, and that is going to really wake you up, and it's going to force you to, like, oh my God, I really need to be kissing the microphone. Now, that depends on the type of microphone you're using, of course, but I'm just curious because your last podcast, it was such a great interview, but especially in the beginning, the audio was kind of in and out on your end. Howard's audio was just great. I loved it. So anyway, I do want to criticize you a little bit on the audio. I absolutely loved how you ask your guests for their CTA right in the front. You know, what's your Twitter, what's your Facebook, what's your website? Just really excellent. That's a really nice thing to do. And your intros are tremendous. When you introduce a guest, we can tell you take a lot of time, a lot of pride in doing it. So, Demand, you're once again leading the pack in your intros. Really great. You have your 6 questions, and you make a transition, and I absolutely love it. Are you voicing that bass? To be honest, it's great, but I want it louder. It's so good, I actually want it a little bit louder. The length of the transition is perfect. The style of the transition is perfect. To be honest, your transition style, that music style, is better than your intro. I absolutely love what you're doing in your transition. And like I said, is it you actually doing it? It sounds like it might be, and it's great. Your closing is nice, especially when you have a teaser about what's coming up in the next podcast. And I understand that's not always possible because sometimes things change. We don't know what's coming up. But if you can perhaps get a little bit ahead of yourself regarding, recording interviews and provide that teaser every time, that's really wonderful. It's really effective. And it's something that I need to do. So, you guys, I give a lot of advice because I've been in this game for a long time. But when I sit down with the microphone, I forget all the advice that I give. And then I listen to myself later and I kick my yeah, you know what I do. I kick my butt for not following my own advice. So take my advice, please. So, yeah, mix your voice a little bit more with the intro, outro. Work on the levels, the volume levels of you and your guests. Oh, and by the way, talking about that one more time, get an audio editing software where they let you use different tracks. Your voice in one track, your guest voice in another track, your intro in another track. So you got a music line, you've got your line, and you've got your guest's line. That's really the best way to do it. Also, and I just started using it, I think I can really confidently recommend, and it's not free. Yeah, I think you get like 7 days free. I can confidently recommend Squadcast. Yeah, Squadcast is a software where you can interview people, and they record on separate tracks. They also record video, so not only audio, and it's great audio, but also video. And let's say, when I do an interview, I always record on my hard drive, and sometimes I record on a digital recorder, and sometimes I still have a problem. Something happens. I run out of batteries on my digital recorder, or my computer shuts down and I lose my recording. Well, that's the nice thing about Squadcast is they do save it to the cloud. So you might miss, 5 or 10 seconds here or there, but generally they're recording on the cloud. So if, God forbid, the power goes out, your computer dies, there's a glitch, you forgot to restart your computer and the software freezes, a battery dies, the microphone, dies, something happens, they record it, which is a really nice lifesaver. You don't have to start over. It's great stuff. Again, the software is not free, but I've just started using it. I absolutely love it. Our next interview will be with Squadcast, and I do recommend perhaps checking that out. And I'm going to be a really selfish SOB here. We have our affiliate link in the show notes, and you can use that. You don't have to use that, but, we all got to try and do our thing. So I just want to say I absolutely love your podcast, Demand, and good luck on the 365 thing there on Facebook. It's not easy. I hope you keep it up. I followed you on Facebook, and I'll be watching what happens, and I hope that the advice I'm tossing out in this critique is useful for you. You probably already know. Thanks a lot. That brings us to another end of the IOB podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like your podcast critiqued, please respond. Just send us an email. Contact at introoutrobed.com. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Intro Outro Bed. We've got a website, introoutrobed.com. Leave a comment anywhere, and we'll put you on our list, and we'll get to you. We absolutely will. Like I said, these critiques do not talk about the content of your show. It's how you're organizing your show. It's the format of the show. So, yeah, keep that in mind. And if we choose you, and that goes for Damon, too, If you would like an intro, TJ is more than happy to create an intro for you 100% free, and it is exclusively for you and your podcast. And you can put that on YouTube and wherever else that you need to use it. So that's a really cool thing that we're offering everybody. We have a newsletter. We would love for you to sign up for the newsletter, www.introoutrobed.com. Don't forget, once again, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Intro Outro Bed. That's our call sign. That's the letters that you need to type in to find us. And if you can't find us, finally, send me an email, mike@introoutrobed.com. That's it for us. You guys have a fantastic day. And remember, we are here to make you the best podcaster out there.